these are my favorite old-time books. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today I am going to be chatting with you about my all-time favorite books. There's a top 16 here. These are going to be in no particular order at all. It's not like this is going to be like my number one favorite book of all time. But these are just 16 books that I've read over the course of my lifetime that I've really enjoyed. Some of these I've read years ago. Some of these I read when I was a student. So sometimes plot-wise, I may be a little bit vague on the details because it's been such a long time. But these are all books that were really important to me. Not in terms of like that I read them at a certain point in time. Like I could do a different favorites list of like books that were meaningful to me because I read them at a certain moment in my life, which is why they are favorites. Things like Harry Potter, Twilight, the Shadowhunters books. But those I don't feel like are 5-star reads in terms of like quality for me. It's more like I read them at very pivotal moments in my life, and that's why those books became important. But these are books that I read that I sometimes even read at those pivotal moments as well. But for the most part, these are books I just really enjoyed for their quality, and they brought me a lot as a reader, and these were all 5-star reads for me. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Nothing is super recent, I feel, but some of the things I did read in the past couple of years and were newer discoveries for me. So I'm just going to talk you through these in no particular order, and then we're going to get going. So the first book here on my lap is this book. This is The Little Book by Selden Edwards. And I don't ever hear anybody talking about this anymore. This came out years ago. I remember buying this. I think, when did this come out? When was this published? Let's see. This was published in 2009. So I think I read it about like a decade ago or so, maybe even a little bit longer. And this is a really, really clever book. It sort of fits into the historical fiction / magical realism element to it, because there is something a little bit fantastical in this book that's going on. We meet our main character right as he is transported in time to turn of the century Austria, Vienna. So turn of the century, I don't mean millennium change, but from the 18th to the 19th century. And he finds himself smack in the middle of this like turn of historical events within Europe. It's almost as if Vienna was this like hub of intellectuals, of revolutionaries, of people who were like trying to change the world, and this main character finds himself tracing the footsteps of, I believe, his grandfather, and we get glimpses of his modern day life and sort of what led up to his time travel moment. And at the same time, we get his life in this historical place where he really has to find his feet at first, and then it just becomes more and more interesting. This is a chunky one, and my edition has that typeset. So yes, this is, I think, it's 480 pages, which doesn't sound like a lot because most people think of tomes as being over 500 pages, but if the typeset is so tight, you know there's going to be a lot of words on the page. So this is not a quick, easy read, but it's a very rewarding one once you really get into the swing of things. Just like the main character, for a very long time, you're very much in the dark as to what's going on, and you very often don't know what's going on. So that is definitely something that is a little bit of a mystery at the same time. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why nowadays, like in the day and age of TikTok, a book like this wouldn't do very well, because this isn't rewarding in the sense of that you get an answer to the mystery per se, but it is a very rewarding read because it's almost like this coming of age, sort of getting to know the character kind of book. And as the character grows within the story, you grow with them. And that is one of my favorite types of like tropes to find in books, if it's like this character development sort of thing. And I feel we get very little of that nowadays, because a lot of it is like just trying to like hit certain points in the plot, and it's like trope after trope after trope, and like, ooh, will they, won't they? But that's never really the case here. So for me, this was an excellent book. I really enjoyed it at the time, but like I said, I haven't read this in a while. It's been a long time. Another book that I read a very long time ago, and this is a very beat up copy because I used to travel around with this all the time. This is Martin Amis's Money. I believe this was written in the 80s, I don't know, it's an older book for sure. It was first published in 1984. My copy is from 2005, so I probably read it again like 15 years ago or so. I remember reading this and really, really enjoying it. If you like unlikable characters, read Money by Martin Amis. This was my introduction to the epitome of an unlikable character. You will hate this character to your core, but that's the point of the story. We meet John Self, that's literally what his name is, and he is living the high life. He is trying to get away with everything. I believe he's in like finance or marketing. One of those like 80s yuppie hotshots. Think Wolf of Wall Street kind of vibes. That's sort of what he's giving off. And he's only like digging a hole deeper and deeper all the time. And he's the king of the world, at least the king of his world. But he's hurting everyone he meets in the process. And this was such a clever book. This is another one where I'm like, ooh, I should reread this at some point. But I want to reread all of these. They are favorites for a reason. This typeset-wise isn't too bad. This, again, it's an older book, so you're going to have to, like, sit with that for a while. This is not a page-turner at all, I felt, but it is a quick and easy read. And again, the character development here is what really, like, made this, like, something I really enjoyed. It's, again, a little bit of that coming-of-age kind of thing. We follow this man as he's on this journey, and you're like, what's the point of all this for most of the book? And then at the end of the book, there is definitely a little bit of a change of heart, you could say. So I really enjoyed this book a lot. If you haven't read this, I would highly recommend it. But do please take everything you read in this one with a grain of salt. And this is not for people who just want to have a good time with their books. This book is not a good time. It's a terrible book. But that's why I liked it. I like gray. I like morally gray characters that do questionable things and that get away with it sometimes. I don't know. My brain is perhaps a little bit weird. And then we have Matthew Plampin's The Street Philosopher. This is the historical fiction that I hold all historical fiction to whenever I read anything that's new. This was written by a historian. This is set in, Manchester? I think it's Manchester. Where is it set? It doesn't say here at the oh yeah, Manchester. Yeah. I was like, this is set in Manchester, right? But it's 19th century Manchester as England is fighting in the Crimean War. I never know how to pronounce that word in English. In Dutch we call it de Krim, the area. And there's a lot of like art theft and stuff going on, and we meet a man who is a journalist for this local newspaper, and he discovers that there's a little bit more going on and that people are trying to benefit of this war in ways that they shouldn't be. And this is, again, a chunky one. I like a chunky book. Chunky books can be the most rewarding. I don't need my books to be 300 pages to enjoy them. This is, again, close to 500 pages, but this is so rewarding. It has a bit of a mystery at its heart. The setting, the historical setting of this makes you breathe, sleep Manchester in the late 19th century. And that's what I like. I think that this book got my love for old things like Victorian, England, Scotland historical fiction going. Like, we all know, that's like my favorite thing. Historical fiction set in the late 19th century in either London, Edinburgh, or any other big city in England or Scotland, I tend to enjoy. And if there's a bit of a mystery, a plot problem we need to solve, I like it even better, and this was one of the first books of its kind that I read. Again, a bit of an older one. This is one that I again picked up. Yeah, this was first published in 2009, so I'm not sure if you can still even find it. His second book, The Devil's Acre, I enjoyed as well, but a little less than I did this one. This one had a better mystery, and the way it all came together was a little bit better for me plot-wise than the second book, but they are both very enjoyable historical fiction reads. So if that's what you like, you will enjoy those. Sticking to our historical fiction theme then, The Strings of Murder by Oscar de Muriel. This is actually a first book in a 5 or 6 book series? Is it 5 or 6 books? I don't remember how many there are. They're all on my shelves. I've read all of them. This series is finished, so if you want to get stuck into a historical fiction series, then this could be a good one, and this one I really enjoy. It's very similar in the sense of the street philosopher that I just talked about, but this is set in Edinburgh in the late 19th century. In this book, we meet a character, Ian Frey, and he is sort of looked down upon within the police force in London, so his father is like, maybe you need to head up north. So he's sort of exiled to Edinburgh, and then he gets put on the one, he gets to collaborate with the one colleague within the Edinburgh Police Department that nobody wants to collaborate with, McGray. So this is also known as the Frey and McGray series, you could say, because those are our two main characters. And they have the best banter. If you like your Sherlockian, Watson sort of banter, that's what we get in this. McGray believes in the supernatural and is a bit, not right in the head, according to most of his colleagues. He only has 9 fingers because his sister went mad, used an axe to kill their parents, and when he was trying to, tell her to stop, she took off one of his fingers, which is why his nickname is Nine Nails McGray. And the story of his sister going mad and how that all plays out is a red thread that runs through all of the 7 books together, but each book also contains its own little mystery that they're trying to solve, where every single time the premise seems to be supernatural, there seems to be ooh, is it vampires? Ooh, is it ghosts? Ooh, is it banshees? But there's always a real life explanation, and the author always ties the explanation to Victorian scientific discoveries of the day. So things that, things like photography and knowing how certain light works and stuff like that. So he always ties it to these historical scientific discoveries of the day, which I really enjoy as well. So it does get a little bit explainy sometimes towards the end of the book, but it's always really fun. The banter between these two is really, really lovely. And I did find that as the series progressed, especially in the final book, this focus on the sister becomes more and more prominent. And that to me was a bit, the first 4 books or so are really this mystery that is solved within the book. And then sometimes we get these little nuggets to these 2 main characters' other lives. And I feel because of the popularity of the series, the author started to go into a different direction. Especially the last book was very chaotic towards the end. But it's a very good series. If you've never heard of it or never read it, this is something a book that I was looking forward to a new installment coming out every single time ever since I read this first one. So this is really lovely, and I really enjoyed this book for sure. We're in the series territory for a second here. This is another book series of mine that I finished and that I really enjoyed reading. This is The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. Not all the books in this series are as good as this first one, I do have to say. The quality of them is really up and down, but I really like the premise of this. Here again, we have a book series where each book contains its own little mystery, but at the same time, there is a plot that ties all of the books together. I believe there are 8 books in this. This has already been finished as well. And same with the Oscar de Muriel Strings of Murder series. I was looking forward to each one of these coming out every year. I think there was a book every year to year and a half in this series. And it was really, really fun. So if you don't know what this book series is about, we meet Irene, and Irene works for an organization that call themselves the Library, and she is a librarian. But in this world, the library functions as a sort of referee between alternate worlds where certain books have to be stolen or kept or guided to make sure there is a certain level of order in the universe, you could say. So it's sort of it's got a little bit of a sci-fi element. There's time travel involved. We get sort of a steampunk version of Victorian England in this first book. But there's also an overly party-esque Venice in the 17th century. And as this character meets other people and sort of goes around the world expands as well. So we learn, I think already in the first book, that the balance of power within the universe that exists in this world is dominated by dragons on the one hand, who stand for stability, order, pretty rigid rules, whatever. And on the other side, there are these fairies, and a fairy world that is dominated, or a world dominated by fairies, is chaotic. There's explosions. You never know what's going to happen. And then there are worlds where it's a little bit more balanced and not one or the other faction really rules the world. But those two factions are continuously clashing with each other. And Irene becomes heavily involved in the plot of these like dragons and fairies and it's a whole thing. And then there's like a lost father who's like in the mix at some point. But overall, especially again here, with the first couple of books, it's focused on finding a book in a particular world, and that world is always like a type of historical setting with like a weird element to it. So, like I said, steampunky Victorian England, that becomes her home base that she works out of, and there's a character there that's very sort of like Sherlock Holmes-esque, that helps her figure things out, and then she starts having a romantic relationship with a dragon, and there's a fairy who's like trying to court her all the time. So she becomes heavily involved in this like the politics of the world, you could say. So yeah, The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman is really, really fun. If you like books, if you like alternate universes, and if you like a headstrong female character who just doesn't know when to stop, then this book series is for you. And I think this is the final series that I have for you. This is Ben Aaronovitch's The Rivers of London. This is the Peter Grant series. This book series is still running. I read them the minute they come out. I've read all of the novellas. I've even read a couple of the graphic novels that exist in this universe. You don't have to read everything to sort of know what's going on. The author does allude to other stories, but and I definitely, when I read the series the first time, read a couple of books out of order for that reason. But this is such a fun romp. If you like urban fantasy, then this is one of the best ones out there. The story does change a little bit. The author has been critiqued for his view on women and the way they are portrayed, especially in the earlier books. But I feel that as the books progress, it becomes a little bit more up to modern standards, you could say. But who do we meet in this book? Peter Grant. He is a newly graduated police constable in the Metropolitan Police Force of London. He's on patrol in Covent Garden in this first book, and something weird happens. Who knows? And we are very, very quickly thrown into this world of wizards and magic, that it's real. And then there's a book about unicorns and all that. But every single book is roughly set in a different area of London. The final book that they did was actually set in Aberdeen, so we do take a couple of trips from time to time. There's a novella that's set in Germany, but for the most part, each book centers around a particular area of London, and then there's this whole like mythology behind it. So it's a really, really nice mix of mythology, magic systems, like fantasy, but it's still set in modern day London, and that's why I like it. I've always called this the perfect blend of Harry Potter meets Luther meets Sherlock Holmes. That's sort of what it reads like to me, but then in a modern day setting. I really love the banter in here. I love the way it goes, and I'm actually rereading this series at the minute. I've been doing like 1 or 2 books a year, especially on my summer vacation, to just read some of the earlier books, and they are still as good as I remember. So that is something that I really enjoy. And the last ones, like these are just really fun, quick and easy reads, but at the same time, I really like how everything sort of comes together in the world. He has a cousin or a niece called Abigail, and she's like my favorite character in the entire series. She's really, really good. Now, if you were to ask me, like, Micah, what is your all-time favorite book? This is the book I usually say is my favorite book of all time. I read this when I was interning as a journalist, so that was like, what, 2007, 2008? It's been a long time since I first read this. I did reread it a couple of years ago, and I still enjoyed it. Upon a reread, I was still like, yes. And this is A.M. Holmes's This Book Will Save Your Life. And this book will not save anybody's lives, but it is the perfect title for this book. This is quite an absurd novel. Again, a main character that you're not supposed to like. I believe his name is Richard. Yeah, Richard Novak. And we meet him as he's like, in his brain, he's at the top of his game. He knows exactly what to eat at what moment of the day, when to get his steps in. He's doing well on the financial market. He doesn't really meet people, though. He's stuck in his house. He trades his stocks, and the only people he sees is his personal trainer and his nutritionist. So it's a pretty lonely existence. And despite all his efforts, he gets a cardiac arrest, a heart attack, right? He manages to call 911, it's set in LA, and they take him to the hospital. And from that hospital visit onwards, his life is no longer the same, and everything just starts to spiral out of his control. This is like the essential sort of like midlife crisis in a book. It's a little bit absurd, the way it's written as well, some of the dialogue in here. It's probably not for the faint of heart, but this book is so good, and it really shows you what a book can be. So that's why I really enjoyed this one. And like I said, when I read it again, I think I read it like 5 years ago, and I still liked it as much as I did when I first read it. So love that. And then another series, I've gotten everybody who I know to kind of read this story. This is Lockwood & Co., The Screaming Staircase. Now, this was also a Netflix television series that was canceled after just one season. And I watched it, and they kind of did the book a little bit dirty. The book is far more exciting than a Netflix series, so if you did give that one a try, maybe read the book. This is a little bit more like borderline YA. I don't remember anymore where I found it, whether it was in the adult fantasy section or the YA fantasy section. But I found it really randomly. I just saw this cover and was like, I think I want to read that. Jonathan Stroud is an author who's very prolific, and he's written a lot of especially children's books and stuff, and always within the horror genre, I believe. But this is really, really fun. All of the teenagers in my life have read it, so I have friends who have slightly older kids, and I put them on to this. I give them the entire series for their birthdays, and they love it too. So especially if you have teenagers or anyone like that in your life, you may want to recommend this to them. But as an adult, I like this just as much. This is very sort of adventure driven. We meet a world, we meet Lucy, and Lucy is a girl who lives in a world where there is a problem, and this problem is ghosts. The minute it goes dark, the ghosts come out. If they touch you, you can die, and so there are special ghost hunting teams that go around trying to take care of the problem. And the only problem is that adults cannot see these ghosts. They cannot hear them. They can only feel the chill in the air. So the adults all tend to stay home. It's the kids and the teenagers who need to take care of things. So they go out in troops, and there's these agencies taking care of it. And Lockwood & Co. is an agency that isn't run by adults. It's the only agency in this alternate London that we inhabit now that is run by teenagers. There's 3 of them. There's Anthony Lockwood, who leads the team, and then there's George, who's the researcher of the team, and Lucy joins them because she's just moved from up north. She's had some bad experiences with her ghost hunting teams there, where they sort of didn't take care of her, and she was put into some nasty situations, so she decided to run away, and she joins them. She was trying to join the other agencies, but nobody would hire her, and they were like, yeah, sure, we do it. And they are going on adventures together. This is really fun. It's 5 books. It's finished. And again, like with the other series that I've mentioned, there is a red line that runs through all of these books, but each book also has its own mystery. In this case, there's a screaming staircase. And let's just say that the adults in this story are not good people at all times. There's also a talking head in a jar in the entire series that's sort of really sarcastic and full of banter the entire time, and they shut him up all the time because they're it's like a ghost. There's a skull, the ghost attached to items, and if you find the item and you destroy the item, you destroy the ghost. But they actually have a ghost jar. So there's a skull in this jar, and the ghost that's attached to it is captured in this jar, which is really strange as well. But that's very enjoyable. For YA fantasy, it's one of the best ones I've ever read. Most YA fantasy, it's okay. But this one was a standout for me. And then we have some more books, because I told you there were 16. Something that I had to read for a course was Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. Again, a book with an unlikable character. Like I said, you have to like your unlikable characters with me. This is about a man called Hazel Motes. Hazel comes back after World War II to the south of America where he lives. I think it's Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure. Somewhere in the south. And this is also about like religion and what does religion mean and when is religion real and all of those kind of things. There's a lot of themes going on. This isn't a big book, but it's not an easy read, especially because Hazel Motes is a little bit full of himself. So being inside of his head isn't the most enjoyable of things. And yet this was one of the best things I ever read, because for a place that is like, it's like he's a little bit delusional at the same time. So he also he makes things worse in his head than they actually are. And because you're like from the outside looking in, even though you know what's going on inside his head, you can see that the things that he's seeing isn't as bad as he thinks it is. And that he's sort of like making everything super complicated for himself and everybody around him. But yeah, Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor was a very, very early 5-star read. And I keep recommending this. If you want something weird and unusual, this is a good one. Some classics then as well. We have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. This is not a very like great edition or anything, but this is the one that I have. This is good. I don't love most classics. I just don't. But Jane Eyre really had an impact on me. I think I've read this like 2 or 3 times in my life. It's one of the very few classics that I go back to and that I keep reading, and I still enjoy it. I like Jane as a character. I like sort of like the mystery, Mr. Rochester. I don't really see them. Like, everybody like thinks of it as like bionic, like a bit like with Wuthering Heights, where everybody like overly romanticizes the relationship of the female character with Kathy and Heathcliff, and in this one Jane Eyre with Mr. Rochester. I feel like it's overly like by the influence of media and especially social media, people like think this is a romance. I've never read it as such. Maybe because I already read this again when I was a student for a course. So I definitely got to look at it through a different lens. So to me, it's not that romance heavy, you could say. I just really enjoy how Brontë tried to explore like the role of women in this like society that is very clearly against them, and how Jane is just trying to make her way in the world. That's sort of what I take from it. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy this one. So that's definitely a long-standing favorite. But I also really like this. Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Again, a bit of a weird book. I like weird books. What can I say? Jack Kerouac, of course, was part of the Beat sort of situation. So Ginsberg was part of that, and like William S. Burroughs. And there was like this whole troupe of writers and creators who were all traveling together. And when they were traveling together, he wrote a book about it. That's essentially what this book is. There is a movie with Kristen Stewart as one of the women in the story. And I think, who else is in there? There's a couple of famous actors in that book, or in that movie. So you could watch that as well. But I felt like the movie wasn't like getting to what the book really tries to do. I think there are 3 to 4 major road trips in this, and one of the things that has stuck with me so much is the importance of music in this story. And music is a very important part of my life, and that was something I could really relate to in this story. The story itself is just, it's teenagers packed into a car at the end of the 1940s, early 1950s in the United States, and they are like traveling around. And Kerouac himself, I believe, has said in interviews that it felt like it was like they were like the last people who really had this sense of like a frontier and like the making of modern America, and this is sort of set right before it. So as a piece of history, it's also very important, and the characters they meet and how they interact with them is interesting to say the least. There are definitely some like questionable things going on in this book. Again, don't read it if you don't want to read about things like drugs and like coercion and stuff like that, because there's a lot of questionable things going on in this. But this is one that I really enjoyed reading. Again, something I read for a course, so that was like 25 years ago. A bit vague on the details for that reason. But a book I go back to all the time is The Catcher in the Rye. I know this is a must-have for a lot of people if you like live in an English language country, that you have to read this in the secondary school, and a lot of people hate it for that reason. I definitely feel that having you read this if you're not 18 yet doesn't make a lot of sense. This book isn't for teenagers. It's about teenagers, but it wasn't written for teenagers. I really feel that, like, I had really bad experiences having to read certain books when I was a teenager here in the Netherlands at school, and that really took the joy out of reading for me. So I know how that feels, but for me, this was an excellent read. I did come to it a little bit later in life, and I really like this. Mine is actually falling apart. It's an old library copy that I picked up when I worked at the library. So that was, when did I work in the library? From like 1999 till 2003-ish, 4-ish. So this has been with me for a long time. I did pick it up like to read it a couple of years later. In this story, I forget the guy's name. Something with an H. I always mess up. Anyways, but the guy in this story, just, you never know what's real with this guy. So you're stuck inside of his head the entire time. And essentially, he's a bit of a pathological liar. So if you go into the story knowing that, this story, A, makes a lot more sense. And B, some of the, like, again, he's not a likable person. If there is a classic, like, if there is a story that gives you the sense of an unlikable character, like no other, it's this one. The Catcher in the Rye definitely has that. Again, I like that sort of thing. There's a bit of like I think the ending of this book is a little bit confusing, but what happens in between, like, I don't know why. Again, this could be one of those books that I just read at a certain moment in time in my life, that's why I like it so much. But this is definitely one where, like, I've read this like 3 or 4 times in my lifetime. It's not that big. It's quite an easy read. Oh, Holden Caulfield. That is his name. See, now it comes back to me. But yeah, this is just one of those books that, this is like a comfort read for me by now, which I don't know if that makes sense. Is Catcher in the Rye anyone else's comfort read? I don't know. And then we have some deeper, darker things, because I like dark things. Daphne du Maurier's Jamaica Inn. I really enjoy this book as well. Yes, I know, everybody's going to tell me in the comments to read Rebecca. I tried it, didn't like it. Then I watched the movie, so now I have a better sense of where the story might go. So I know I have to reread that. Because I got stuck on the, like, ooh, we're having a fun summer in the south of France sort of thing. I was like, where is this going to go? And then that was like a third of the book, and then I was like, I DNF'd that one. But Jamaica Inn, 5-star read, 10 out of 10. Really love this. This is giving Wuthering Heights vibes, but better. That's the way I felt about it. So this is about a girl, I don't remember her name, but she is sent after her parents die to live with her aunt and uncle who run the Jamaica Inn. Set in Devon, Cornwall, south of England. There's also this like swampy area surrounding this inn, and she finds out that her uncle and aunt are perhaps involved with things that aren't entirely legal. And she's like walking around these moors, and she's very, very lonely. So it's giving like the sort of atmosphere of Wuthering Heights, but then the plot is completely different. It's very much about trust, about family. How do you find your family? What do you do if people you know very well, or you're supposed to like just vouch for at all times, do things that you disagree with? It's very much that, and I really enjoyed this. This was a really, really good book, and that book made me want to read everything by Daphne du Maurier, so that is something I'm going to have to do at some point in my life. There cannot be a list of favorite books without me mentioning this. This is a book I tell you about all the time. More people should read this. This is, again, a little bit older, so I feel it's a bit forgotten in terms of, where things are going to go. But this is Elizabeth Kostova's The Historian, talking about a rewarding big book. This is like 750 pages. It's a big one. I think I got mine around like 2005-ish or so. It was published in 2005. That's also when I bought mine. This is about a girl or woman who we are reading sort of her diary entries, and she is writing those entries when she is traveling across Europe with her dad, and her dad is trying to find his PhD supervisor. So one night his PhD supervisor just vanishes into thin air, and he wants to find out what happened to him. And he travels across Europe to try and find out what happened to this man, and takes his daughter along for the ride. So we get the perspective from the daughter, talking about her dad traveling around and sort of what happens there. This is such a good road trip. That's the center of the book is just a road trip. Daddy-daughter time, all the people they meet in between, and at the same time, and I don't want to give away too much, but this is a vampire story. It's very clear from like the beginning that's whatever happened to this PhD supervisor was a bit supernatural. I'm not gonna lie there, but yeah, you'll find out. You'll find out when you read this. This is really good. It's a slow burn though, but a very rewarding slow burn. You gotta like slow books to like this one. And speaking of like gothic-y things, Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Garcia Moreno was one of my far-star reads. This made me want to read everything that she's written as well, so that's why it had to go on here. Mexican Gothic is about a woman whose niece, has been married off into this weird family that live in this weird home, and she doesn't really trust that her niece is taken well enough care of. So she goes to visit the niece, and she's sort of like the outsider looking in, but the longer she stays in this house, the more she becomes part of the story. It's one of those ghost story, horror kind of stories without it being true horror, where like the house is like almost like another character, you could say. I really enjoy those books. Again, some unlikable characters in here. That family that she's married into, wow, boy, they are nutters, complete nutters. So this is a really enjoyable read though. It's not that long, page turner for sure. And finally, I have to share this one. I was like, shall I put this in? I'm not sure, but A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This series got me into fantasy, and as I was putting the list together, I was like, there isn't that much fantasy on here. I do read quite a bit of fantasy, but nothing ever really makes it to favorites list. I like it, but very often I feel there's elements to it that I didn't enjoy as much. But with A Darker Shade of Magic, I can confidently put that in like my all-time favorite books list, because this is the book that really sort of made me fall in love with fantasy. I do feel this series in particular is sort of on that bridge between young adult and adult fantasy, so I don't feel it kind of fits into either category. But this is lovely. I think her name is Lena or Kel. I don't know. Kel is one of the main characters, and I think Lena or Luna, I don't remember her name. It's been years since I read this, but let's just say the girl is in a particular version of London, which is like 18th century. One of the Georges, the mad one, is king in London, and she meets someone who can transverse between different types of Londons. There's grey London, red London, white London, and black London. The person who could travel is Kel, and Kel takes her along for the ride. Grey London doesn't have much magic. Red London is a world where magic thrives. White London is becoming pretty bleak, and Black London has succumbed to magic and the powers that like interact with it. So Lena and Kel start to travel back and forth between these different Londons. Each world has one person who can like use a particular magic to travel between these worlds, and they become involved with that. That's all I'm going to say. This is only 3 books. I believe the series has finished, but then there's like The Fragile Threads of Power, which I believe is set in the same world, but not necessarily a continuation of the series. I haven't read that one yet. That's the one I haven't read yet. But this is excellent. I like the 3 books. It was enough to tell the story and to sort of give us enough about these characters. In fact, I actually thought the 3rd book was a bit of a slog because we got a lot of background on one particular character that didn't really add too much to the story, at least I found. But the first 2 books are really, really good. The 3rd one is still good really well as well, but there's parts you can skim. Yeah, and those are all of my favorite books of all time. I realized I just hadn't done a video like this in a while, so I hope you enjoyed watching this video today. I'm coming to you makeupless because I've decided to have a makeup-free week because I haven't been feeling all that well the past couple of weeks. So I was like, I'm just going to film barefaced, and at least I still have a video. So thanks so much for watching me here today. Thumbs up this video if you liked it, and I hope to see you again really, really soon in a new video. Bye-bye.